Hello there, ladies and gentlemen, and let's see, everything's set up and we are good to go. Now, because I was so, well, first of all, welcome every single one of you to another Rage video, where today, ladies and gentlemen, on this beautiful Sunday afternoon, we are going to talk about another In a Nutshell video tonight. Now, based on the video I did yesterday about gratitude from In a Nutshell, it kind of made me realize that there are a lot of things we have to be thankful for. And indeed, it's a very noble exercise to fulfill out. And if you want to watch the whole thing, I'd recommend checking out the video for yourselves, because that brings us very neatly into this video, where they talk about loneliness. And all I'm going to say at the beginning right now is this might go on for a while, so just to let you know, this might be a bit longer than usual. Sometimes, even when you've written down, if you want to fulfill the exercise and, saying what you're grateful for, and the fact that there are people all around us, there are many, many times where we simply do not feel very grateful, because irregardless, we're still in a very peculiar situation, and it might easily come down to the fact that we are lonely and that we feel alone inside and to the outside world. You see, it's not just enough for the fact that there are people on this planet and that we are surrounded by people that can actually fulfill us from being lonely. I think it revolves around that video I did about the antidote to dissatisfaction. It's the fact that at the end of the day, we consider ourselves a minority of one. The fact that there is nobody else on Earth that thinks, talks, acts the way that we do. And that troubles a lot of us. And I can honestly say I feel like I'm in that same bracket as well, where I feel as if, like, the things I talk about, the things I believe in, sometimes I feel like I'm the only person who really believes in the things I do. And that could be a combination of a whole load of things. COVID, in this particular moment, which sort of, dismisses the idea of social interaction as much as it can be tenanted for the sake of, healthcare, which it has its ups and its downs. But I think no matter what I've said for nearly 10 years in the past, I'm not entirely sure now I really feel as if I would like to be lonely. Well, or like to be alone. Because, truth be told, if the decisions I've made is where I'm at right now, then maybe it's possible I have made the right choice in trying to, be seen as a minority of one. The problem with that is that I don't really want to be seen as a minority. I want to be seen with people. I want to be part of a group. I want to be part of something huge and formidable and impressive. I want to be... I like my privacy as much as anybody likes me, because look at all I've got in this room right now. I've got DVDs. I've got hundreds of books. I've got all sorts of things to fulfill my time and take away, fulfill my privacy, because I feel like it's like a parasocial interaction I have with the outside world, but it is just that. It is I've mentioned this before, where I feel like my life is sort of like come down to validation through words of what people say on the internet. But sometimes I feel like that doesn't answer the question, because it makes me realize that people sympathize perhaps with me, or empathize, or want to develop conversations with me. But on the other hand, they could be on the other side of the planet. I'm talking about face-to-face stuff, in the flesh. That's the sort of thing that I think would cure a lot of people of being lonely, is the fact that there are physical, real-life people in front of them who they can talk to. Because if this is a thing that's been occurring for human history for thousands of years, so is this really what... For all the developments and the advancements of, technology has given to us, like FaceTime, Skype, Discord, and whatnot, are we really any closer together than we were before? Because because it's sort of like almost become an outlet to put our ideas out into the world, to try and see if there are people who recognize that some of the things we believe in and some of the things we share and are afraid to admit, there is an outlet for ideas like that. But from my experience, more often than not, sometimes I feel like it's a good chance to know that there's people out there who think like me and do all these things, but at the same time, I think the problem I feel like I might go through, and it might be different for other people, is that we're kind of like looking for a permanent solution to end all loneliness. So we don't have to deal with the fact that we are sometimes unmotivated to do anything, because loneliness, a bit like, dissatisfaction, is an anchor that drags us down and prevents us from moving, because we're caught up in grief or bitterness, depression, anxiety, fear, among many things. And there are a lot of things that can trigger loneliness, and a lot of things that make us feel very, very unhappy with our lives. But with all that being said, I want to actually see what, in a nutshell, I've got to say for this for themselves, because it's been about nearly 3 years since I last saw this, so it'll be good to reevaluate and maybe come up with something to add. So, if you guys want to check out the original video for yourselves, links will all be in the description down below. Let's begin in 3, 2, 1, and where's my mouse? Oh, there it is.
Everybody feels lonely from time to time. When we have no one to sit next to at lunch, when we move to a new city, or when nobody has time for us at the weekend. But over the last few decades, this occasional feeling has become chronic for millions. In the UK, 60% of 18 to 34-year-olds say they often feel lonely. In the US, 46% of the entire population feel lonely regularly. We are living in the most connected time in human history, and yet an unprecedented number of us feel isolated. Being lonely and being alone are not the same thing. You can be filled with bliss by yourself and hate every second surrounded by friends. Loneliness is a purely subjective, individual experience. If you feel lonely, you are lonely. A common stereotype is that loneliness only happens to people who don't know how to talk to people or how to behave around others. But population-based studies have shown that social skills make practically no difference for adults when it comes to social connections. Loneliness can affect everybody. Money, fame, power, beauty, social skills, a great personality. Nothing can protect you against loneliness because it's part of your biology. Loneliness is a bodily function, like hunger. Hunger makes you pay attention to your physical needs. Loneliness makes you pay attention to your social needs. Your body cares about your social needs because millions of years ago it was a great indicator of how likely you were to survive. Natural selection rewarded our ancestors for collaboration and for forming connections with each other. Our brains grew and became more and more fine-tuned to recognize what others thought and felt and to form and sustain social bonds. Being social became part of our biology. You were born into groups of 50 to 150 people, which you usually stayed with for the rest of your life. Getting enough calories, staying safe and warm, or caring for offspring...
I like to say right now, that might be something that's quite interesting, because born into a very particular society, that is, I'd say, perhaps it could be a big contributor to the idea of chronic loneliness, because how many, books, TV shows, movies have you ever seen where there's a society and one person does not belong because they don't agree with the ideas of what's going on? Burmese Days is a pretty strong example where the main character, John Flory, he does not like the society of the European club, which is full of basically British imperial empire builders, and they're all content with, snubbing the Burmese, calling them the most atrocious things possible. absolutely some of the most horrendous acts of racism towards, violence and, buying girls for slavery. And Flory just, he wants to have nothing to do with them. And he wants to remove himself and actually be with the Burmese because he enjoys their society. And there's a lot of phrases in Burmese days that I cannot use here because this channel would literally get terminated the very next day, but it gives you an idea of just like the spitefulness, the almost unseething amount of hatred that is current in the European society in Burma. And Burmese days is just the one I wanted to pick out because that's the one where the prejudice is shown throughout in the most plaintive black and white scenarios. I'm saying this because what about the societies we live in? What about the fact that we don't belong there because somehow we feel as if we have less in common, or some people just stand out far too much, and it gives you the idea, and that's not us. Because when I was in university, I was in class with a lot of people who were very, very outspoken, and they were very flamboyant, and I'm not saying anything wrong with that. It's just, it gives you the impression that for somebody like me, I just kind of like sat there in the corner and just kind of like listened to all of this, wondering when the hell was it my turn to speak. And then when I did, everybody else kind of looked either mystified or just bored. And it gives you the impression that they were more interested in each other who were like them rather than somebody like me. I know there will probably be people that I still keep in contact who will say that that might not be the case, that we were just kind of like just intrigued or anything like that, or we were just listening and all that. But it didn't feel that way back then, and I feel like that's a big part of why I didn't like university that much. It's because whatever, let's just continue. And they say that apparently some of the people you meet at university you'll meet for a few years and then you might never ever see them again. I don't necessarily don't want to see any of the people I met at university ever again. It's just, again, I'm gonna shut the window. It's just at times I don't particularly think they will feel, all that thrilled about myself, perhaps. That's, again, completely conjecture, but we'll have to wait and see. Who does this? Someone messing about with a concrete saw, so that's good news. Anyway, whatever, let's get back on track.
Was practically impossible alone. Being together meant survival. Being alone meant death. So it was crucial that you got along with others. For your ancestors, the most dangerous threat to survival was not being eaten by a lion, but not getting the social vibe of your group and being excluded. To avoid that, your body came up with social pain. Pain of this kind is an evolutionary adaptation to rejection. A sort of early warning system to make sure you stop behavior that would isolate you. Your ancestors who experienced rejection as more painful were more likely to change their behavior when they got rejected and thus stayed in the tribe, while those who did not got kicked out and most likely died. That's why rejections hurt, and even more so, why loneliness is so painful. These mechanisms for keeping us connected worked great for most of our history until humans began building a new world for themselves. The loneliness epidemic we see today really only started in the late Renaissance. Western culture began to focus on the individual. Intellectuals moved away from the collectivism of the Middle Ages, while the young Protestant theology stressed individual responsibility. This trend accelerated during the Industrial Revolution. People left their villages and fields to enter factories. Communities that had existed for hundreds of years began to dissolve, while cities grew. As our world rapidly became modern, this trend sped up more and more. Today, we move vast distances for new jobs, love and education, and leave our social net behind. We meet fewer people in person, and we meet them less often than in the past. In the US, the mean number of close friends dropped from 3 in 1985 to 2 in 2011. Most people stumble into chronic loneliness by accident. You reach adulthood and become busy with work, university, romance, kids, and Netflix. There's just not enough time. The most convenient and easy thing to sacrifice is time with friends.
Well, that's an interesting point, because I was like, okay, you know what? I'll tell you. I'll get to this point. Is that for those who know, that there's like a second. There's barely a second in the day that I particularly want to waste, because I want to make as much of my time as I can with people, as well among everything else. But one of the things I've kind of like struggled to come to terms with is that there are many hundreds of people, probably people I knew, who are doing the exact same thing, and it's not because they don't want to talk to me anymore. It's because they've got their own lives, but from my perspective, it looks as if the second they stop having to, put up with me or saying hello to me in the mornings, then they will move on and try to completely disengage themselves that they had anything to do with me at all. Two occasions immediately spring to mind when this sort of thing happened. The first, when I was about 14, is that we were having some kind of like test in a chemistry class, and then we had this new kid who came from Dundee in Scotland, and I had the friends I usually like kind of like talk to every now and then for like the last year. There was only like, you're only like supposed to have like 3 people on a table, and my mates at the time thought it would just be better off if I was just on another table and they were there with this new kid. It felt as if like they chose him over me, and I kind of like sit there and thought like, well, why do I have to go? Why can't we just all stay together in that? And they decided this, and it was already, the odds against 2-1, and I was already out, and I didn't even call the idea to let anybody else go. I just didn't like the idea that all of a sudden I was expendable to those people, and that sort of thing. It gives you the impression about who my real friends are, because if they could do that to somebody like me, then they could do that to anyone. And I think we've all been in scenarios like that. The second time when this happened was in 2019, during the final few months when I was at university. One of my professors, he gathered like a couple of us round because he wanted to talk about something in literature, I believe. And I can't quite remember what it was. I think it was something about like in Fitzgerald's work. And he talked about this, and then I gave the answer to what he was asking, and I said it once, and then I said it again, and then we were looking each other in the face, and I said for the third time very clearly about what the answer was, and then he still looked round asking for an answer. You know what I did then, ladies and gentlemen, when I realised that 3 times he was not listening to me? I packed up my stuff. This was like about 2:30. And like there were only few people in the studio in there. I packed up my stuff, went home, worked on some stuff at home, and then when I came back to university, came back to uni the next day and worked, I just did that, and I took care literally not to speak to anyone, no matter what. I think that was like the last time I ever spoke to anybody at university was during that day and that. Because it became very, very clear to me that there was nothing I could say or do, absolutely nothing that would have got anybody to have engaged me at all. So I just kind of like accepted that they've made their decision, that, you know what, they wanted to have this attitude towards me, then you know what, I'm not going to be a part of this anymore. So I just left. If I had said anything to anybody after that, it must have been very sparse and very, very short. You know what I'm saying? Because, I mean, you might think that's a pretty, childish thing to do, but what else do you think I was supposed to do? They weren't going to listen to me, no matter what. So Why why should I waste my time with people who couldn't care less? I know I probably should have been the bigger person and stayed there and listened, but I didn't feel like the sort of person. I didn't feel like I wanted to be a bigger person. I didn't feel like I wanted to listen. I didn't feel like I wanted to have anything more to do with these people. So I decided to just do it myself. You know what? That's that. I'll go and spend my time somewhere else rather than people who couldn't give a shit. You know what I'm saying? Anyway, where's blinking mouse? There it is.
Until you wake up one day and realize that you feel isolated, that you yearn for close relationships. But it's hard to find close connections as adults, and so loneliness can become chronic. While humans feel pretty great about things like iPhones and spaceships, our bodies and minds are fundamentally the same they were 50,000 years ago. We are still biologically fine-tuned to being with each other. Large-scale studies have shown that the stress that comes from chronic loneliness is among the most unhealthy things we can experience as humans. It makes you age quicker, it makes cancer deadlier, Alzheimer's advance faster, your immune system's weaker. Loneliness is twice as deadly as obesity and as deadly as smoking a pack of cigarettes a day. The most dangerous thing about it is that once it becomes chronic, it can become self-sustaining. Physical and social pain use common mechanisms in your brain. Both feel like a threat, and so social pain leads to immediate and defensive behavior when it's inflicted on you. When loneliness becomes chronic, your brain goes into self-preservation mode. It starts to see danger and hostility everywhere. But that's not all. Some studies found that when you're lonely, your brain is much more receptive and alert to social signals, while at the same time, it gets worse at interpreting them correctly. You pay more attention to...
Whenever I travel to work and that via the metro, sometimes there would be people on the platforms and waiting and that who I don't want to say look particularly threatening and that, but they don't particularly look like they give people dirty looks, and I don't want to judge them or anything like that. It's just sometimes I feel like maybe they're angry about something else, but that doesn't mean they want to take it out on you or anything like that. It's just it gives you when that sort of thing happens, it gives you the idea that you could literally be attacked from any angle possible, even for people who are perfectly calm. So it gives you less of a reason to try to open up to or say hello to anybody. It's not that I become more defensive, it's that I become more susceptible about what exactly should I say to anybody. And what's slightly more horrible than that is that when it becomes obvious, it becomes more obvious in a basic conversation whether or not it's a bit hard to describe. It's because you just try to have a good day in that, and you want to show your kindness and you want to do stuff like that, and the second you get onto a platform or you surrounded by people who look grim and very dire, then you feel just depressed, and you don't really feel as if it kills the mood. I think is what I'm trying to get at. And it couldn't be really through any fault of their own. It's just sometimes I interpret as that feeling as if they are disgusted and unhappy because I'm happy and exhilarated, or countless other things.
To others, but you understand them less. The part of your brain that recognizes faces gets out of tune and becomes more likely to categorize neutral faces as hostile, which makes it distrustful of others. Loneliness makes you assume the worst about others' intentions towards you. Because of this perceived hostile world, you can become more self-centered to protect yourself, which can make you appear more cold, unfriendly, and socially awkward than you really are.
the thing of what he said about hostility is that's kind of like what I was coming to. It's that it's like being put into a society where everything is so hostile and everybody is just giving people any sort of look whatsoever is enough reason for them to attack you. And if that's the thing I felt like when I was at university more than anything. It's just everything felt so hostile when anytime I tried to open my mouth to anything. But it was all right for them to do it to me, but I couldn't do it to any of them because I had no backing and I was going to be isolated even more.
If loneliness has become a strong presence in your life, the first thing you can do is to try to recognize the vicious cycle you may be trapped in. It usually goes something like this. An initial feeling of isolation leads to feelings of tension and sadness, which makes you focus your attention selectively on negative interactions with others. This makes your thoughts about yourself and others more negative, which then changes your behavior. You begin to avoid social interaction, which leads to more feelings of isolation. This cycle becomes more severe and harder to escape each time. Loneliness makes you sit far away from others in class, not answer the phone when friends call, decline invitations until the invitations stop. Each and every one of us has a story about ourselves, and if your story becomes that people exclude you, others pick up on that. And so the outside world can become the way you feel about it. This is often a slow creeping process that takes years and can end in depression and a mental state that prevents connections even if you yearn for them. The first thing you can do to escape it is to accept that loneliness is a totally normal feeling and nothing to be ashamed of. Literally everybody feels lonely at some point in their life. It's a universal human experience. You can't eliminate or ignore a feeling until it goes away magically, but you can accept that you feel it and get rid of its cause. You can self-examine what you focus your attention on and check if you are selectively concentrating on negative things. Was this interaction with a colleague really negative? Or was it really neutral or even positive? What was the actual content of an interaction? What did the other person say? And did they say something bad, or did you add extra meaning to their words? Maybe another person was not really reacting negatively, but just short on time. Then there are your thoughts about the world. Are you assuming the worst about others' intentions? Do you enter a social situation and have already decided how it will go? Do you assume others don't want you around? Are you trying to avoid being hurt and not risking opening up? And if so, can you try to give others the benefit of the doubt? Can you just assume that they're not against you? Can you risk being open and vulnerable again? And lastly, your behavior. Are you avoiding opportunities to be around others? Are you looking for excuses to decline invitations? Or are you pushing others away preemptively to protect yourself? Are you acting as if you're getting attacked? Are you really looking for new connections, or have you become complacent with your situation? Of course, every person and situation is unique and different, and just introspection alone might not be enough. If you feel unable to solve your situation by yourself, please try to reach out and get professional help. It's not a sign of weakness, but of courage. However we look at loneliness, as a purely individual problem that needs solving to create more personal happiness, or as a public health crisis, it is something that deserves more attention. Humans have built a world that's nothing short of amazing, and yet none of the shiny things we've made is able to satisfy or substitute our fundamental biological need for connection. Most animals get what they need from their physical surroundings. We get what we need from each other. And we need to build our artificial human world based on that. Let's try something together. Let's reach out to someone today. Regardless if you feel a little bit lonely or if you want to make someone else's day better. Maybe write a friend you haven't spoken to in a while. Call a family member who's become estranged. invite a work buddy for a coffee, or just go to something you're...
I'm going to just do that now. Let's see what happens.
You're usually too afraid to go to or too lazy to go to, like a D&D event or a sports club. Everybody's different, so you know what's a good fit for you. Maybe nothing will come of it, and that's okay. Don't do this with any expectations. The goal is just to open up a bit, to exercise your connection muscles so they can grow stronger over time, or to help others exercise them. We want to recommend 2 of the books we read while researching this video. Emotional First Aid by Guy Winch, a book that addresses, among other topics, how to deal with loneliness in a way that we found helpful and actionable. And Loneliness, Human Nature and the Need for Social Connection by John Cacioppo and William Patrick. It's an entertaining and scientific exploration as to why we experience loneliness on a biological level, how it's spread in society, and what science has to say about how to escape it. Links for both books in the video description.
And that, ladies and gentlemen, is technically the end of Loneliness, except it's not really the end. It's... What I've gathered from just this video alone is that I think one of the worst things I think that could ever happen to anyone is the fact that if you really want to make an enemy out of a man, ladies and gentlemen, tell him that his illnesses are completely incurable. Tell him that through his faults, through the fact that he has... Maybe there's a man who only has one arm and somehow somebody says to him, there's absolutely no way you can live a normal life from now on, so what's even the point? That is... You couldn't really do any more damage to a person's self-respect if you said something like that to him. But when it comes to stuff like loneliness, the worst thing you could possibly say to them is that everything is entirely your fault and you get absolutely what you deserve because you chose to do it. Because who actually really... You've heard me use phrases like free will and choice over the last couple of weeks, but who exactly chooses to be lonely? You don't, because being lonely means having very little interaction with the outside world, very little interaction with the people who are closest to you, becoming estranged and becoming isolated, and the world rejecting us introspectively. So, why exact... If I really had to be honest about my opinions about loneliness and all that, is that I can't help what has already happened. There are things in the past that I wish I kind of tried a bit differently. There are things that happened in the past that somehow I know why they happened. I have a difficulty enough for trying to explain exactly how it came to be. And I also have a difficulty of just really just standing up for myself. I feel like that's the problem why I feel lonely. I feel like so consigned to defeat almost immediately because people seem to think I can't stand up for a fight, and all people have to do is just talk to me roughly and give me a dirty look or anything like that, and they would just think immediately then that I'll just know my place and then sit back down again. And it's a cowardly thing. That's what I think it is that I'm too much of a wimp to just try and straight up just be honest and say, you know what, I think I don't agree with how this is how I should live. I don't agree that people should be acting like this towards me. I don't want to accept it because I don't think it's right. And I cannot be alone for thinking like this. There've got to be people who think that the way they get treated or the way they get talked to for just trying to live their lives is not acceptable. I don't like that idea because people are different and not everybody's going to take things the same way. Maybe it's because my autism, which makes it difficult for me to not only... Listen, I have difficulties accepting change because sometimes not everything is completely within my control. during the beginning of my third year of university, we were told that we were going to get, dividers and that, so we could have like a little like cubbyhole and that, so we could work. We never got those. We never had them since I started university in 2016. It made me feel as if like just I had no real like space of my own, just kind of like everything was shared. And then we got told whether or not we wanted a plan as to whether or not we wanted, like separate desks and all that, instead of just the two really long ones. Everybody else wanted it, and I was kind of like the only one who voted for things to just stay as they were, because I didn't really think it was convenient for me, because for how my setup was for when I was working. And then it occurred to me that like literally that anything, take that as a democratic thing aside, it still says something when, to me at least, that there was nothing I said or could have done that could have changed anybody's mind. And I just kind of like felt like, well, I have to accept it, no matter what my opinions were or not. So it wasn't bad. It wasn't good enough that nobody wanted to sit or next to me anyway. So, and even when the desks were being moved, they just kind of like dumped my work into the corner like it was just a heap of rubbish. And I thought, if that's the way they're gonna do this, then why should I be surprised? Or why was I thinking that anybody was going to do anything different? I kind of like just and eventually I just kind of like stopped trying, and I didn't think there was going to be like any point to it. It just it's fascinating, just the fact that with how everything ended up. I'm really kind of like surprised that I just decided not to quit university almost within the first few months, because because when you're stuck in that environment, it doesn't matter if you love your subject or not. You just don't want to have anything to do with it, because you can't work in an environment where everybody feels that hostile towards you. You can't work in an environment. Imagine if I'd left university and I went into a job where everything was as it was in university. People just, I don't want to live in that sort of society, in that sort of way. I couldn't, and I didn't, and I still would not. I resent it physically like it was the plague. And I suppose when all things are said and done, maybe it was just for the best that I just decided that the best thing I could have done was to just got on with it and just finished things off, because it was something I couldn't put up with anymore. It's just something I couldn't stand. And you know what? That's attributed. I don't really want to say that's like attributed to my autism or not. It's just I feel as if like that was not the right thing to do. So I just kind of like pushed myself further away from them, because I didn't feel as if like there was anything I could have done to have made any difference. And just things just got like worse and worse, and I know it sounds self-pitying and all that, but that's how it felt like. It felt as if like there was nothing I could have done, nothing I could have said that would have changed anybody's mind, and I don't want to like put up with that anymore. So that's just why I made that decision. So looking forward, because one of the other bigger problems I've had with is really the downside of me doing all these videos this year, is that we are nearly a quarter of our way through this year, and time has just flown by, despite the fact that COVID is a thing. But the thing is, after over a year, you kind of like get used to this. And again, I've been so involved in my work, then it doesn't really make much of a difference whether or not I enjoy this or not, because I've focused myself on the task at hand, and I don't feel particularly bad about it. I work, and because if I don't work, then I won't have a chance of becoming, successful as I want to, and being surrounded by people who at least, accept and acknowledge the way I am. For my work. It's just I'm desperate just to be with more people like who understand me and who can at least, you know, take me for granted, because during my time at university and maybe possibly during high school, I was surrounded by people who I think just kind of like put up with me, either, you know, in the foreground or just put up with me in the background. The former for secondary school and the latter for university. But despite the rights and wrongs of what happened, all I've got to say right now is just that was in the past, and even though there's nothing I can change, and even though it may be as bitter as I'm trying to make it sound, it's a learning experience, and I've got to try and do it better, because things can get worse very, very quickly. But hopefully by the time this is all over, I'll be back on track to, you know, seeking the two things that I feel like I'm desperate to get, even more than stardom or, you know, money or anything like that. Validation and recognition. And because it could be open up to more people who feel lonely and feel as if like they have no way to express their thoughts and opinions, like perhaps I do, or perhaps someone else. I just want to try and fill a very large void with the fact that somehow I'm here for a reason. I'm here to provide something to fill up this hole in which I feel is a problem, because that's just straight up who I am. I can't freaking change that, because I don't really want to change it. I feel like that's just who I am. And if people don't like it, then they can literally move on for all I care, because I'm here and I have to listen to a lot of bullshit, ladies and gentlemen. Trust me. So why on earth should I not be valid and make myself known? Because I don't want to feel excluded when other people are included. Because why are my opinions not any more valid than anyone else's? I think I've just got to friggin' touch down, literally squeeze and then slap my balls, and then make myself heard. And then we'll see whether or not people really want to listen. Because I think there are people who do listen. And I think those are the people I've actually got time for. You know what? It's all give and take. And that is going to be my cure for loneliness. Give and take. And we'll see exactly what comes of it. So, I thank all of you guys for watching this video. Please make sure to leave a comment down below let me know what you felt about this video, and I will hope to see all of you guys again in the next video. Take care, bye for now.